Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another video. My name is BN, and today I have a good friend with me today. Is Wyatt. He's actually a very prominent member of the Minnesota Blockchain Initiative, and he's a former president of the Minnesota Blockchain Club, Crypto Club. I went there many years ago. Wyatt is always very active in the crypto space in Minnesota, and I pretty much see him at every single event. So he is very, very knowledgeable about the entire crypto space, the blockchain space. Well, he's not really focused in crypto. He's really into the technology itself and the utility of the technology. So, Wyatt, I just want to welcome you to the discussion today. Thanks for coming.
All right, yeah, thanks. It's been a long time coming. I know we've talked about this probably 4 or 5 times, saying I would come on the podcast, and now I'm finally here. So thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun for me to just sit down and talk about the world that I love so much in the blockchain and crypto world. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Good to see you, man. You know, Wyatt, there's a whole lot going on in the whole crypto community right now. You know, there's been actually a lot of meetups popping up. I don't know if it has to do with the crypto blockchain price. Crypto price, Bitcoin's been going up like crazy. Um, but before we get more into some of those conversations, what have you been up to in the space recently?
Yeah, so recently, I graduated from the University of Minnesota. I was the former president of the blockchain club there that I helped to found. There was a lot of other people besides me that also helped with that, but and then I became the president of it my senior year. And now I just work in kind of a advisory role with the Minnesota Blockchain Initiative, and I do my day-to-day job is in an accounting firm, one of the big four accounting firms in Minneapolis. Just having a good time. I do a lot of stuff in the blockchain world there, but that's not my main job. I'm just an accountant, CPA. There is my main thing. So yeah.
Man, you're an accounting CPA at what, 23 now? 20,
22.
22, man. I see a lot of people get CPA at around probably 30 or 40.
Yeah,
You've been moving pretty fast there.
it's been a dream of mine to become a CPA since I was probably 18 or 19, and I got the summer off before I started work, so I just took the time and did it, and very happy I spent the time doing it. Now that I'm all done, I can just focus my nights and weekends on the passion projects I enjoy more than studying for a test. Wow.
Awesome, awesome. And just diving more into, I know you were the former president of the Minnesota, the University of Minnesota Blockchain Club. And obviously, this channel is all about education, right? Our goal is to educate folks in the community to learn about blockchain, the utility of blockchain. And as the former president of the Minnesota Blockchain Club, and with all your knowledge about blockchain and the importance of the utility, why do you think education in this space, especially to the layperson, is so important?
Well, I think that I don't know. Well, it's a hard question, and I think there's kind of three questions in there. I think there's the university education route, there's the education to the lay person, and then there's kind of the community education for those who are already deep into the space. And I think I'll start where I know best, and that's at the university level, which is where we kind of see the actual best education in blockchain occurring. It's no secret, I think, to the world that universities are where ideas are discussed, and people hang out and have some crazy clubs, right? There's a club for everything. And so almost every major university in the United States has a blockchain club, and these clubs are more interconnected than I ever thought when I left for college. And still today I'm shocked by, like, I have friends at the University of Michigan, Columbia, all these schools, and they're just so interconnected and built together. And that's kind of what we want in this world is where these universities um, can work together. They can meld the minds per se and build this kind of area where we can discuss blockchain and not just cryptocurrencies or the
Right.
price of things. And so that was just huge. Was my time that I spent the 2 years at the University of Minnesota incredibly impactful. And I think anyone who's at the college level, either form your own blockchain club or join your schools, because truly that's where you're going to learn the most. All these college kids, we're kind of crazy. We have the nights and weekends where we just learn about things, we read a lot, and you don't have you know your parents or work yet, so it's just the perfect opportunity there. And then I guess, sorry to ramble on there, but yeah, that's why the universities are so important. And I think we see in most technologies that universities really are where and young students at universities tend to push forward technologies. Like we see, in the early days of like AI, it was largely driven by universities, and not just because a university is, where smart people are, because um, like
Obviously.
that's not always the case. It's primarily where passionate people are.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and when you create clubs, that's where the even more passionate people are. And so that's why I think as we kind of transition now into talking about education for the layperson, it's we got to have clubs and communities, because you know, the world of blockchain today, I don't think is for everyone. And maybe that's a hot take, but I don't think we need to be building blockchains for my grandma to use, right? These are systems that are incredibly complicated, ridden with scams, and are incredibly risky too, right? There's a high probability that most of these chains won't exist in 10 years. Um, and that's just not something that I think a regular person should be working with or dealing with.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
but then again, I think that people who want to be in this space, who want to be more of a researcher or have the stomach for the type of risk that we're taking, they should definitely be able to. And that's where I think this is the club focus is where we need to be. I've seen a lot of like courses for regular people or
Yes.
whatever, and it's like, to an extent, I think there's a level of like you have to really want to buy into this future before you're just buying Bitcoin or whatever, right? Soon
Right.
we're going to have ETFs and all that, where those can be where you can purchase Bitcoin easily. But if you want to transact in these sort of network states or whatever you want to call them, I think that's where um, people who are regular people should probably avoid that for now.
Right. And why you mentioned that the blockchain club has extended to a lot of universities now. That wasn't the case a few years ago. Is it really true now that you can find a blockchain club at most major universities in the country?
So at least every Big Ten university has a blockchain club. Uh, I think that's where I was closest to.
Wow.
I mean, I also, when I say major, I might be, missing a lot. But you're just always shocked. Or at least I was shocked by like, oh my gosh, like this tiny school that I've never heard of has a whole blockchain club of, and most of them are tiny, right? 10, maybe 20 people, but those group of people, they just hang out together. Like my early founders of the club and me, like Quan was the guy who actually founded the club. I just helped him. Me and him would hang out in the library discussing blockchain and epileptic curves or however you say it. I'm no math guy. Like super late at night. And I remember one night it was freezing and we were sitting outside Kaufman Memorial at the U of M, just discussing the future of this technology. And that's kind of like that's what you can find at universities. It doesn't need to be a formal club, but you can at least find a group of people who
Right.
enjoy what you love. And
And share and
thankfully
kind of
for me,
share that
yeah.
passion to a certain extent. When you mention that, obviously we're talking about blockchain here, but some of our audience too might not really fully grasp what blockchain really is. For me personally, when I think about blockchain, I think about a ledger that is digital,
Mhm.
and it can be programmed to do certain things. It can
Yep.
be programmed to be open to the public. It can also be permissive, restricted to certain people. Um, you know, how can you extend on that? What are some of the other things that blockchain is is actually that makes blockchain very, 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 very important?
Yeah. So I think coming from an accounting and a tech side, I kind of see three definitions of blockchain. I think there's the blockchain data structure, right? Which is just, essentially a linked list where the previous block is used as the input to the next block. And if you change anything of the previous block, it'll mess up the next block. And I think that if you can understand that as a data structure concept, or maybe I don't need to use fancy word like data structure, but more just like if you can imagine a snake or whatever, where you have, if you change the back of the snake, the head of the snake is not the same, or like the full snake is not the same.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to like dumb it down either. I'm just saying, data structure might scare people off or whatever. And so I think that there's that, right? Where it's just a data structure um, that can be the blockchain. And that's useful on its own. Even if you don't have a network surrounding it or anything, you can use these blockchains for your own personal needs. Like if you want to store data, I don't know a great many use cases for doing this, but hypothetically, if a business per se wanted to store like their employee records in such a linked list, then they could. But what makes blockchains impressive is when they come together with networks. And we see kind of two implementations. I know you mentioned permission and permissionless, but really where I see the divide in blockchains is among the state machines versus ledgers. And a state machine is more like um, how do I put it? Like a vending machine, right? Where you click certain buttons and you input money and you get a defined output, or at least you hope you do. Um, so these state machines are like Ethereum and Solana, right? Like
Right.
these things that are built to change the state of a computer and to be programmable. Um, but then there's just ledgers, right? And those are like Bitcoin or I, I guess Zcash or these other things are purely ledgers, right? All they do is record someone sent money between two people. And I know Bitcoin is programmable and now there's talk of smart contracts coming onto it, but really the original implementation of Bitcoin was meant to just be a three-entry ledger from who to who and with signature.
Mm.
Um, and so that's why it's important. And so I think understanding each of those three things in separate is important. And people like there's just different use cases for all three of those different things.
Now,
And
with the programmability of Bitcoin, you just mentioned, uh, will that means we have to incorporate was that the Lightning Network into speeding up Bitcoin, getting the scalability out there a little bit?
So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of debate about that, and I am definitely not the right person to ask about all of that. I have friends who are very against the Lightning Network. I have friends who are very for it, and I think at the end of the day, you know, in my eyes, Bitcoin is supposed to act like the 2,000 pound gorilla or whatever, right? Like it's going to be slow moving. It's not meant to be what Ethereum is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
um, like I don't think we needed super fast transaction times or all of this. Like, yeah, it's nice. It'll get more people into the global financial system and stuff like this. Hypothetically, however, I think it adds additional risk, and I think there are other blockchains that could have done it, or at
right.
least innovations that could have been made rather than spinning off Bitcoin.
Yeah,
However,
yeah.
tons of people will
I
debate me.
I do agree. I actually do agree with that because obviously, we can still incorporate tokenization of Bitcoin without having to speed up the transaction or increase scalability. Um, I don't know if you agree with this too, but I will rather see Bitcoin to be more of yeah, like a store of value type.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously, you know, taking few seconds or few minutes to get that transaction to the next party, I don't think it should be a big deal if we're talking about value, yeah. You know? So,
Yeah, and I think now is a great time to bring up what we had discussed a little bit earlier, but really, what's Bitcoin's use, right? And people will debate that to the end of the earth. And to me, and maybe my philosophy will change in 2 weeks, but at the moment, my philosophy on why Bitcoin is valuable is that Bitcoin acts as kind of a check system on global financial or monetary policy. So, what does that mean? Essentially, um, it's incredibly hard for most people in the entire world, including in the United States, to leave their current monetary regime that they live under. I would assume most of us, me especially, own primarily U.S. dollars and U.S. based stocks, with maybe a couple, international stocks, or maybe a couple of dollars here or there in some foreign currency. Um, and without the introduction of Bitcoin, there'd be no way for me to leave that effectively. And I live in a very free country, and whatever I am allowed to buy whatever I want for the most part, as long as the SEC okays it. Um,
you have to throw that in there, right?
yeah, I mean it is true. But like I can buy almost any foreign currency that I wanted to. However, those are still all fiat currencies. So I think um, overall, if we could, or Bitcoin acts as a way in which people are able to leave the current system that they're a part of, and that's really powerful to people because before today, you really couldn't leave, and Bitcoin gives you that ability to do so, and to me, that's where Bitcoin derives its power or its value from.
Right.
Other blockchains, I don't think do that. I think Bitcoin. This is a unique Bitcoin solution. So yeah.
Absolutely. And why one of the things I always think about too, I think about countries like in other places in the world where there's some sort of like, civil war going on or something. And imagine a family that wants to kind of uh, maybe leave that environment and go somewhere else with their children to be able to start a new life. But unfortunately, with the way the global system, financial system is set up, you can't take that local currency and and get it across the border somewhere and use it. It's almost really difficult, except for very few global currencies, maybe the Japanese yen, US dollar, the euros or so, but countries like in places like Syria or something, and those are some of the challenges. And it seems like from what you just said, Bitcoin is technically a window to solving some of those global issues.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who are deep into Bitcoin or whatever will argue that, like, oh, we need to destroy the global financial system or whatever and replace it. Um, to me, and I work in the global financial system, so maybe I'm a little biased, but at the end of the day, I think we're doing a decent job. I think it can be improved. Obviously, everything can be. Actually, it needs a lot of improvement, but I don't think we want to see a world in where, example, the U.S. dollar collapses.
Right,
And I think that what Bitcoin allows is for people to act as a check on the US government, where, hey, I have the opportunity to leave if you guys mess this up. So please don't.
right. Hmm.
I'm not Michael Sayer. I'm not running and buying all my Bitcoins with all my money. Um, but I like the ability to say, hey, I have the ability to leave if I wanted to, and I'm keeping check on you guys just by the nature of this ledger existing outside of the American financial system. So yeah, that's
Absolutely. And another very important thing is that a lot of people are looking up to Wyatt is the Bitcoin halving that's coming up next year, I think in 2024, around April. Um, and this is something that is very highly anticipated. It's something that happens every 4 years. What do you think the halving does for the space as a whole? And how is it, what does that mean when it comes to maybe the supply of Bitcoin and the scarcity of Bitcoin in that sense?
yeah. I mean, the halvening or however you say it is obviously incredibly important, but and there are people who've been telling me for 3 years or 4 years now that the next time it halves, we're going to get to a $1 million. And to me, I tend not to distract myself with the price of assets. However, um, I do think that the halvening will have an impact on price, obviously, and scarcity, and there's going to be less and less supply as years go on, and that also means we're going to move in the Bitcoin ecosystem to a world that's more reliant on the transaction fees paid rather than the mining reward. And that's another interesting concept to discuss. I'm just not sure how it's all going to pan out.
Right.
Um, yeah, so it's almost impossible to say, but I do think that we have to take like the energy costs into account here.
Yes.
Um, and so a lot of people talk about, is Bitcoin related to the price of energy, or is energy related to the price of Bitcoin? Obviously, the global economics of energy are not related to Bitcoin, right? Like the price of oil does not get determined by the price of a Bitcoin. Oil is much larger than Bitcoin, at least today. But what I believe is that miners tend to maximize their profit and obviously will turn on more miners or turn off miners when it becomes more or less profitable to run at certain amounts of electricity. So I actually believe, and a lot of people disagree with this, but that Bitcoin, or that the amount of hashing power is directly correlated with the price of Bitcoin, and not that the price of Bitcoin is related to the price of electricity.
Absolutely. I do agree with that too.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
because that's
Yeah.
why you see the huge jumps and moves in hashing power,
Yes.
and hash times rather than um, like if it was just constant or an effect that the price of energy determined the price of Bitcoin, we wouldn't see those jumps, and that's why I believe that. But
Yeah,
once
and,
again,
there's
obviously,
been a lot of, I guess the computer scientists probably, most of them mentioned that the very last Bitcoin will be mined, I think in 2140, something like that. Um, now, huh, 2140, that's 100 and something years from now. The
yeah.
question is, obviously, with as we go through halvings, the computational capacity to mine a Bitcoin will be probably more expensive, except maybe we come up with some sort of better way to, to mine a efficient, energy efficient way to mine those Bitcoin. But if we go with the current mining and energy mining process right now, to the very last Bitcoin, that Bitcoin has to be very, very expensive to be mined in the first place.
Well, yeah. If we go on the current pace, however, remember that Bitcoins are like the complexity of mining a Bitcoin doesn't have anything to do with how many Bitcoins have been mined. It has to do purely with how many other miners there are. Um, so hypothetically, the final Bitcoin could be mined by a guy in his garage with a single computer. Um, we don't know because we don't know in 120 roughly years how many people will be mining Bitcoin still, if it'll still even be relevant. If quantum computers will break it and mine it next year, we don't know. Um, I don't think so. To that last point about the quantum computers, but
There's a lot of people actually working on quantum computing proof.
yeah. So, but what I do think is that like there's a very real possibility, especially with like proof of work is not ideal under the current arms race mechanic that we have, right? Everyone's racing to mine bitcoins or buying more and more expensive machines when in reality, I mean, that's great for the network and it's created an incredible distributed system, but it would be, I believe, a better system if, for example, you, me, my mom, my dad, my brother each owned a single miner that then ran the Bitcoin mining and wasn't super fast because then we'd use, I believe, less electricity than these massive farms, albeit more expensive electricity because I don't live in like a maximally optimal area
Right.
for buying electricity. But I think that would improve the network. And I do think that there will someday be a day if Bitcoin does become like a real global phenomenon in which everyone will own a small miner and these massive mining operations will maybe stop. I maybe it's a pipe dream, probably is, but that would be my dream is to see because once again, there's no requirement that we get faster computers to mine bitcoins. It's
Right.
only become that way because of the arms race that we have undergoing. And if we could enter a gentleman's agreement to not continue the arms race, then I think the world would be better and Bitcoin would be more distributed, and it would be great for everyone, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and Wyatt, one of the questions I usually get from some of my viewers is the concept of transparency when it comes to blockchain technology. I mean, obviously, it's interesting because we're talking about a ledger here with blockchain, and in some cases, the ledger can be permission based, and in some cases, it can be restricted. You know, it can be permission or restricted, or it can be open ledger for everyone, like Bitcoin is. Everyone can have access to viewing a transaction on the ledger. Now, how is Bitcoin transparent in in it on the blockchain, obviously? How is blockchain transparent in essence? when a blockchain can be designed to be permission based?
Well, I think that, yeah, that's a great question. And, something that stumped me for a while, thinking like hypothetically. But this goes back to my earlier point about blockchains as a data structure, right? And really, I feel like permissioned blockchains are that, right? They're just using blockchains as a form of way to store data, not store the data itself, but store proof that the data occurred.
Right.
Um, and so, why is it transparent, right? Well, if it's permissioned, right, like no one can access it, well, then it's not transparent. However, it becomes transparent if they show you bits of it. And I guess I can explain that from, let's say you are a regulator coming in, and let's say I have, I want to prove to you that I have done certain actions or knew certain things before a certain day, right? So I could have put in a blockchain data structure specific information, let's say a file. I could hash that using SHA-256, put it in my blockchain data structure, and then build additional blocks on top of it as time has passed, right? Now, if I change a single letter in that document and then I give you the document and the blockchain and say, here's my proof that I knew this or that this document existed before this specific date, it wouldn't compute out because
Right.
the entire ledger has changed. So it's not transparent in that everyone can see it, but it's transparent in that anyone who's given the information can recompute it. So therefore,
Ah, that
even
makes sense.
even those lockdown ledgers are still more transparent than a normal business computing system that has no history.
So in other words, the ledger is transparent, um, based on the fact that it can be fact check, pretty
Yup.
much. Ah,
And maybe transparent isn't the right word here, but more it's verifiable, I guess,
yes,
which adds
yes.
a level of transparency when required.
Huh.
Um,
Wow.
yeah.
That is interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. Actually, verifiable is a word that's frequently used in this space as, I can clearly see transparency dimming down. Maybe during the early stage of blockchain, transparent was a huge word.
Well, yeah, and I think that, transparent when you're talking Ethereum or Bitcoin is a huge aspect of what they want to be. But then, these permissioned blockchains came in and they're not really transparent, but they are verifiable
Right,
as long as they design them correctly, which not all permissioned blockchains are even designed well. So
right,
um, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I see a world in which every company would have multiple of their own blockchains running for medial tasks, but those medial tasks might require some proof of ordering, right?
right, right,
And for example, like which users have access to which sections of the company or which users were hired on what dates. Things like that aren't super important and thus don't require a you know Bitcoin level node and all this stuff to run. But by storing it on a blockchain run by three computers as a data structure and not as a full network, those are then verifiable by outsiders, by auditors, regulators, the public. Anyone who wants to be given that information can then prove it themselves and will just build a better world of trust for everyone out there because I think public trust is very low for a lot of companies, right? And
yes,
these blockchains could seriously help improve the trust that we have in our institutions that we invest in, work for, and rely on to run our world these days. So yeah, I think that's my dream is to see a world in which these systems are universal and not necessarily transparent, because you don't want to have your ledger of everyone who works at your company publicly available, but verifiable by
Right.
other people.
Absolutely. And why you've been in the space now for years and you've seen a lot of innovation. You've probably have read so much about what's going on in the ecosystem. What is something that really fascinates you about the blockchain space? What are some innovations that you've actually come across or you've read about that gave you the aha, this is something.
Yeah, I think, I mean, throughout my life, lots of them, right? I mean, my earliest aha was figuring out, just how the blockchain worked, but I'm figuring you're not asking that. You want the recent ones. And those
Yes.
recent ones, I think, and this is not an endorsement of the chains I'm about to reference, but rather that I think they're doing interesting things. And the first one is Flow. It's not a very popular chain, and I haven't heard much about it, but I read their white paper on the plane ride home, um, from for Christmas holiday, and while I was on the plane ride, reading this Flow work paper, essentially white paper, sorry, the Flow team has found a way to separate the different sections of a node into four different nodes, right? Essentially, a transaction bundling node, a verification node, a compute node, and an
Interesting.
execution node. And
Huh.
I probably labeled those wrong, so Flow, don't come hurt me or whatever. But essentially, what this does is, we have a lot of issues just around the block store of, or not block store necessarily. I think it's more, um, what is it called? The in-process transactions like on Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
Which haven't yet been processed. How do we get those things into a block, right? Well, Flow, rather than having the people who are supposed to be voting on blocks bundle up those transactions, they have one group of nodes who do just that. Then they have another group that computes these, and these are done by massive data center grade computers, and those then send a zero knowledge proof to verification nodes, who then verify that the work done was correct. So rather than voting on each individual transaction or bundling them and running them yourself, they're essentially able to just verify the zero knowledge proof and move on. And then there's one final note, and once again, I'm not saying this perfectly, but the idea is that they've split up the work. Now, Flow, I believe, is incredibly centralized, at least from looking at their current, amount of nodes they have. It's pretty much completely controlled by the company that runs them. It, at least it seems to me, that that's how it currently works. Um,
It's interesting. Is it flow as in FLOW?
Yep,
Flow. Okay.
FLOW. And I mean, it's just really interesting technology. And I'm excited to see where this kind of separating compute and consensus goes in the next 2 to however many years. I mean, it's truly a novel creation. I just hope that the people behind Flow will add in more nodes and allow it to become more decentralized in the future, because right now, at least it appears fairly more like a test net rather than a truly decentralized system. But we'll see in the future.
Now,
And
is flow up and running currently, or is it just in test phase?
I'm not sure. I think it's up and running. And once again, I'm more kind of fascinated by the idea here
Yes. Yes.
rather than the network. So
Yes.
we'll
Absolutely.
have
Yeah.
to
It's
see.
something. It's a white paper. Actually, I might check the white paper out figured out what their roadmap is, but that sounds very interesting. It's almost like um, separation of nodes, and I think it really helps with even um, with scalability too.
Yeah, and that's the idea is like, Ethereum having what 10,000 nodes process every transaction. That's going to be that's not going to work, right? Like so
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah,
so
there's been a lot of is there any other thing maybe in the space that fascinates you and any new I know you have a lot that you
yeah.
could talk about, but
I'll just list them off instead of going in depth, but I think NFT compression on Solana has a huge potential. I know it's not going to be unique to Solana forever. Zero knowledge proofs as well as zero knowledge snarks. Those things are going to be huge. At least I believe. I've also, uh, what is it? Like optimistic rollups. So optimism, layer twos, all that's really cool. Me personally, I love learning about cross chain things. Like they're all super fascinating to me. But I would say, yeah, I think that at least the biggest like thing that jumped off the page in recent months has been the whatever's going on at Flow, and I need to read more about it and figure it out. But just in the couple hours I had to read on my flight, that was really cool.
nice.
And I also have to say Chia too. Once again,
Interesting. This
don't
so
own
no
any
financial
Chia.
advice, yeah.
Yeah, I don't own any Chia. I don't know about the ecosystem or community, but their little system of mining, the proof of right or whatever, it's just super fascinating to me and something I just want to learn more about. Um, yeah, so
Absolutely. Why there's so much in the space right now, there's just so much, even NFT alone in the space can keep you busy for the rest of your life. Just
yeah,
so
no
much, there's so
kidding.
much to learn about NFTs and smart contracts and just a lot, you know. Um, Now with all those different individual ecosystem in the whole crypto blockchain space here, which area are you more focused in? Are you more into like NFTs? It seems like you mentioned that you talk a little bit about NFTs a few times.
Well, I brought up the NFT compression on Solana,
Yeah.
and to be honest, I'm not very interested in NFTs. But what I think is cool about NFT compression is the fact that you can compress large amounts of NFTs, maybe not as JPEGs, but rather as like pieces of data, and then store them. And I don't fully understand how compression works on Solana or the compressed NFTs and all that. But I have a good friend, Amy. She's Solana girl is what she goes by, I guess, in the world of Bitcoin and all this. But yeah, she talked to me about this idea she had for moving cookies on chain. We all have cookies in our browser, keeping things running. And these cookies are important to advertisers, right? They wouldn't be spending billions of dollars and fighting the European Union and all this if they weren't extremely valuable. But what we want is not for tech companies to own our cookies and use them to grab the value off of us, but we want to own our own cookies because they do drive value. They allow the search engines to find what we want to see. And thus, compressed NFTs, I think, give us the opportunity to bring cookies or small amounts of data from our past on chain that allows companies to pay us either for our work or our data, or at least allows us to have greater control over it. And that's once again, all Amy's thinking, not my own, but it fascinates me. And yeah, NFTs, I couldn't care less to be honest, but the the future that the compression algorithm of Solana potentially gives us via compressed NFTs is very cool to me. So
Absolutely. A few weeks ago, I think a week ago, or so, I had a chance to interview Darlington, who is a very prominent member of the Cardano community, and I always ask people, "Are you a Bitcoin maximalist?" Because why it sounds like you are.
a Bitcoin maxi? I wouldn't say I'm a maxi in anything. I'm really just I love the technology, and I think anyone who hangs out with me for long enough will know that to me it's the tech that's here, right? I want to
Right.
see a world in which people control their own data and are free to use services, pay each other directly peer to peer.
Yes.
Um, and I couldn't care if Bitcoin was $1 or $1 million, because at the end of the day, the systems that this tech enables or could enable in the future are going to change the world for me. They're going to change the world for everyone to give them what I believe is a more fair world, or one in which people are. I guess I don't know what fair is, but in my opinion, a more transparent and ethical world in which people can understand what they're buying, who's using their data,
Right.
who's doing things. Because yeah, I mean, ethics are hard, and we're definitely not getting into that here. But at least to me, transparency and making sure that people are know what they're doing, that's what I want to see in the future, and that's what I think blockchains enable. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the part of blockchain that really fascinates me. Why the fact that, we do not have to create a world where we make, we make it, we appeal to people's emotions to do right,
Mm-hmm.
but rather build a system that makes it mandatory to do right. You know?
I think that's going to be a lot harder to do than we think. Um, everyone's come up with the solution to exactly how they would fix the world, but I mean, we'll see. No, I totally agree, but I'm also like skeptical, right? Because economic engineering of doing the right thing is not always turned out perfect in the past. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why we can talk all day about crypto, blockchain, and some of the most interesting project in the space. It's always really nice catching up with you. I really, really look forward to us to doing more interviews in the future and getting more in depth into some of those very interesting topics. Because a lot of people, uh, as the space develop and the ecosystem becomes bigger, a lot of folks want to be educated on what's going on in the space and how they can actually take advantage of, you know, learning some of the concepts and some of the technology in order to innovate also. And that's the most important part I see about crypto and blockchain. Like you mentioned, the technology is the value, you know.
mhm.
So on that note, are you currently invested in crypto, blockchain, any technology? No financial advice here.
I mean, in very small amounts. I mean, I probably collectively own 300-ish US dollars in 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 all my blockchain assets combined. And maybe that means I'm not actually invested in this space or whatever, but really, like I said, it's not about the price to me. It's about the tech. And I get FOMO like everyone, and I buy a couple of dollars here or there, but Yeah, I mean, I own some Bitcoin, some Ethereum, um, your
Nice.
standard run of the mill things, but I own some NFTs also, actually. So I'm not all anti NFT, but they're all NFTs made by my friends, which I feel is how you should own NFTs is like ones that you truly value and think are cool.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I would love to invest more. I have just left college, so it's not like I had a boatload of money to be super invested or whatever. But yeah, I invest a little bit, but not a ton. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And then we get into our last word before we close up here. Wyatt, this is an educational channel. We talk a lot about crypto, blockchain, digital currency, Web3, all of that cool stuff. Um, just for my audience, what are some of the things that they can do to actually um, start to learn more about, crypto, blockchain, and the ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah, I think number one is you want to read, read some books. Uh, I there's great books that I've read. Brunsk and Tartar. I'm probably not saying that at all correctly. They wrote an incredible book a couple years ago um, about blockchain or yeah Bitcoin and understanding it, and then as well uh, Narian et al. She wrote an incredible book. Um, Comes from Princeton Press. I'm forgetting the names of these books. I have them saved on my computer, but I I didn't save the front page of them, of course. So I don't know the titles. But yeah, reading those books, and I can send you the links to them so you can maybe put them in the description. And reading, white papers.
Yes,
And if you're not a fan of reading, join a group. You'll become a fan of reading because you know I think it's more fun to have conversations when you've read a little bit about the stuff, right?
yes,
And you don't have to trust Wyatt said it. You can trust the blockchain book you read said it, and this other book you read said it, and because your friends are cool and all, but we're trying to get to a trustless world. Like you want to read it yourself. Read what Satoshi told us all years ago, and you know, talk to your
absolutely.
friends and get as many different sources as you can. But yeah, you just gotta read. Like in this era of Bitcoin, this is like, or in blockchains, this is like early technology in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, right? You're not going to whip open an Apple II and just play Minecraft like it's 2023, right? Like this technology is hard to use at this point. It's even harder to understand. So read, take some time. Um, you'll be shocked by how much just cool stuff is out there. Because it's not all finance, it's not all politics, it's not all economics, it's not any one thing. It's really this huge system of really cool areas and like we said earlier, you can spend a lifetime learning about any of these things. So just dive in and read. And
Abs-
you'll have a blast, I think. At least I
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from the man himself, Wyatt. And, all you have to do in this space, you have to read, you have to seek knowledge, you have to find social groups, you have to attend events. We have the Minnesota Blockchain Initiative in Minnesota. And in your local community, if you're out of state, if you're in wherever you are, you can always just search on your phone, blockchain group, blockchain meetups, blockchain community. And that's how you get folks that are fascinated about this space to actually connect with them and be able to learn as well. Um,
yeah
Without any ado, guys, I encourage you to hit the like button first and also subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing more interviews, hopefully in the future with Wyatt, and we'll be tapping more into so many different interesting topics. This guy has so much knowledge about blockchain, and I cannot wait to. I didn't want it to blow it up and just start talking about a lot of things. We just wanted to make this video very casual, very simple, and hopefully in the future we can do a lot more videos. Thank you so much, Wyatt, for attending, and thank you guys for watching this video. Hit the like button, don't subscribe to the channel, and comment below if you have a question for Wyatt. Comment in the comment section, and we look forward to having you in the next video. Thank you, guys.